back to the channel, guys. As we get close to finishing this car up, I'm going to be finding small items here and there that I'm going to have to resolve before the car goes up for sale. A couple of those were found yesterday as I went and got the car registered to drive. I got a license plate for the car, so we are legal to drive the car. I did drive it down the road a little bit, probably a couple of miles. The top nut on the max spinning rod coilover was loose. I had to tighten that down. It was giving a little bit of a clunking noise. That is resolved now. One other issue that I took care of was a slow to start. Basically, you would go to start it the first time, it wouldn't start. You turn the key off, turn it back on, and then it would start. And that's been happening ever since I've owned the car. I changed the fuel pump in the gas tank with a Walbro 255, and that didn't resolve it. And so finally I went ahead and swapped out the fuel pressure regulator on the fuel rail, and that did resolve the issue. So it fires up first try every time now. So I'm happy that is taken care of. I did see a small oil leak around the distributor. I changed out that O-ring, so hopefully that will resolve it, but it may be coming from the valve cover gasket, so I'm going to pull that valve cover off here in the near future and tighten that down and reseal it as well with some Honda Bond around the corners, because that is a culprit of a common leak. Today's video is actually going to be the exhaust video. I'm going to pull this old pace setter rusted exhaust off of here and throw on a brand new HKS exhaust here. So hopefully that'll go pretty smoothly. The HKS isn't actually made for the CRX. It's made for the 88 to 91 Civic SI. So it is longer, and it will have to have a section cut out of the mid pipe. And that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be using my Titan Harbor Freight welder and some welding gas here, and hopefully that'll weld up pretty clean. And we'll get that sprayed in, covered up so it doesn't rust in the future. Hopefully throw that thing on here and get some sound clips. First thing I'm going to do though is get some sound clips of this old pace setter just to show you what it sounds like compared to the new exhaust a little bit later in the video. old exhaust is off. I was originally going to unbolt the sections and pull it apart, but even though I used that bolt buster tool to break those bolts free, that thing is a lifesaver, by the way. I'll leave a link down below for it. It's expensive, but it saves a ton of time and headache on rusty bolts or bolts that are seized. But the crimp-on connectors, like I was saying, actually crimped the pipe and it wasn't able to slide off, so I just used a Sawzall and cut it off of there. No big deal. We're going to be scrapping that exhaust anyway. It's in pretty rough condition. Really can't reuse anything on it other than the catalytic converter, which we will have to reuse. Now, the HKS exhaust, like I said, is a little bit longer on this mid-pipe section. I read that it's about 8 inches too long, and I did a little bit of measuring there, and it was 51 inches from the end flange all the way to the start of the 90 bend here, and the other one was I think 43, so that's 8 inches difference here. I've got this line marked here along the top, that way we can line it up after the cut. I'm going to cut it right here at the weld, right after the weld, that way whenever I re-weld it, it's going to be butted up right against there and it'll be less noticeable. And then I'll actually cut it down here 8 inches further, butt it back up, weld it together like I said, and we should be good to go on that. And then I can throw it on the car. So let's go ahead and get this set up and get a cut-off wheel and get this thing cut where it needs to be cut after I get it marked with some tape. Okay, to get a more accurate measurement on the cut without knowing if it's going to fit up exactly where I want it, I went ahead and bolted up loosely the rear muffler section as well as the section over the rear lower control arm. The front B-pipe here is actually clamped onto the catalytic converter, which is bolted onto the downpipe. So this is the difference here between the flanges. So this is actually how much we're going to have to cut off of the B-pipe. So I'm going to measure from bolt to bolt, or basically flange to flange, to see what the actual measurement is, and then I'm going to go from there. So from the center of the bolt hole in the front to the center of the bolt hole in the rear is actually 7 3/4. So it's not quite 8 inches. So 8 inches may have pulled the rear section back toward the front of the car just a little bit, but a 1/4 inch isn't going to make a big difference, especially with these rubber hangers. You got a little bit of play. So I'm going to probably decide that 7 3/4 is going to be good enough, because these slots, these bolt holes here are slotted like I was saying, so we can have a little bit of adjustment after we cut it. well, the HKS exhaust is installed. The modifications weren't too bad. Had to cut that 7 3/4 off and re-weld it together. I'm not a professional welder, so the welds didn't look great. I had to grind them down a little bit and pretty them up and then spray some high temperature paint on there. That turned out really awesome. No leaks from that. The exhaust itself sounds amazing, and it actually looks amazing as well with the dual tips there. It's got that perfect OEM look that I was going for with the black muffler and those dual tips. The sound of it is actually quieter than the Greddy SP2 that's on my other B16 CRX, but it's still got that aggressive deep tone to it. I think it sounds perfect, as well as the Greddy. It's really just a minor difference between the two, but they both sound great. I love the look of this one a little bit better though because of that single tip out there. It's like 3.5 or 4 inch tip. It just doesn't suit the car. It's more of an early 2000s styling. This is more of the original OEM styling. Now, the car is pretty much done up to this point, other than cleaning up a few things such as, like, I got to sand and buff the quarter panels on the rear. I've been putting that off. It's got a little bit more orange peel than the doors and the fenders that I've already sanded and buffed. I am going to have to rebuff the hood because after sitting out in the sun for about an hour, there are some hazy spots that formed on the hood, so I'll rebuff that. I'll probably end up rebuffing the whole car just to make it look pristine. Also, during my test drive the other day, whenever I went and got this thing registered, the alternator is probably bad in it because at high revs it gives the battery light. That it could be a sign of a high voltage situation. When it spins up, the voltage regulator inside the alternator is going bad. So I've got one on order. I'm going to swap that thing out, and then we're just going to keep cleaning up these small little details. Got the washer hose pulled out here because I put the headliner in. Didn't want that to drop back in there. And I want to put the squirter in there just yet because I got to buff the top of this hood, or the roof actually. So stick around and we'll get this thing finished up, and it's going to be on the market pretty soon.